Good morning, everyone. Today, it's my pleasure to speak with Professor Uwe Brandes. And Uwe is a professor of the practice, our founding faculty director of our Urban and Regional Planning Master's Program at our School of Continuing Studies. He's also affiliated with our Science, Technology, and International Affairs Program, STIA, at SFS, and with our Law Center. He also serves as faculty director of our Global Cities Initiative. So Uwe, thank you for taking the time today to join us. I'm looking forward to our conversation. You bring such a remarkable breadth and depth of experience in urban design and development to your work here at Georgetown. You've served as a public official. You've served as a leader at the Urban Land Institute and as an expert and advisor to a range of projects. So tell us, what drew you to this field and what interests you the most about urban design?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a great pleasure to be in conversation with you today. It's a great question, and it's a question that, I continue to think about all the time. How did I even get here? I think I had some very powerful early experiences in life, which brought the power of the built environment into focus for me. One is, as a small child, I grew up in a place where there were a number of buildings under construction. And as a young boy, of course, that caught my attention. But what was incredible is that I ended up living in those buildings and growing up in and around those buildings throughout my adolescence. And it really showed me the power that the built environment has on us. Second is that I grew up biculturally between living in the United States and in Germany. And when my parents would take me back to Germany, we'd go visit Berlin. And even as a young child, it became very clear to me immediately that cities and the way in which cities are managed have great power to divide and exclude people. And that, the forces within cities are certainly not all for the good. And so that was a very powerful experience. I love cities. I love walking around cities, and I love buildings, but I have found a kind of a special interest in the scale of neighborhoods and the environments that we live our daily life in, bigger than just one building, but not as overwhelming as an entire city. And I have, throughout a series of experiences and opportunities, been able to work at that scale and think about how the future of neighborhoods might be different for people living in them.
Now, the COVID-19 crisis has invited all of us to reflect in new ways on how interconnected we all are, especially those of us living in dense urban environments. So what sorts of reflections have you had over the course of these last 8 months as we think in new ways about our lives in public spaces?
Well, it's such an interesting moment for us right now. And I would say earlier in the summer, not as much right now, but early in the summer, you may have noticed there was a kind of a media spike where many different stories were being written about the death of cities, how COVID was going to drive people out of cities. And I certainly don't believe that to be the case. We have important lessons, though, that many people are now very familiar with, and that is that the impact of the virus has been extremely unequal across communities within cities. And so learning about that, learning about the conditions related to public health, related to social and economic division, thinking about how those things accelerated the impact of the virus in some communities and not others. This is a huge issue of social equity that is front and center for all of us thinking about urban communities. On the flip side of that, though, I'd say that this has been an absolutely remarkable event, and you know better than many, many others how quickly we have had to change our behaviors, adapt, learn. And to me, this has been one of the most hopeful aspects of the situation that we're in right now. We know as a society and as cities and as neighborhoods, we know we need to change to do better, to be more sustainable. But one thing that we have seen just in the very recent past is our collective ability to modify our behaviors and to think about the ways in which we relate to each other in a new frame. And so that is something that I see as very, very positive, actually. And many people are thinking about and speculating about the manner in which we can use this as a model to rise up to, for instance, the climate change challenge and do so many other things, important things that we want to do in cities.
Now, I mentioned before you serve as faculty director of our Global Cities Initiative, which brings scholars together from across our university to think creatively about the challenges and opportunities facing urban communities around the world. Why do you think the work of this initiative and these types of conversations are so important in this current moment?
Well, they're very important in the moment, but they're also very important to understand over a longer period of time. And so I'd like to just take a step back here first and say that we are living through the most remarkable and most unprecedented age of global urbanization. As many people know, globally, more or less, we have about half of the people in the world living in cities today. And that percentage will grow to somewhere between 70 and 80% just in the next 30 years. So this is a remarkable systemic shift occurring around the world. And it is that unprecedented global trend that we have tried to use as a way to bring together many different members of the Georgetown faculty into a conversation about the opportunities that this trend might represent to them and in their field. I think what's really exciting about the Global Cities Initiative is that it is by design interdisciplinary. It is not just about, we have many, many individual faculty across the university doing incredible disciplinary-based urban research. And the initiative seeks to lift them up and bring them into conversation and into dialogue and into research with members of the faculty that are outside of their discipline. And this is really a wonderful opportunity to embrace the interdisciplinarity of cities themselves through faculty dialogue. One of the reasons why I think this is so important is that is this really kind of larger question around agency. Are we going to let cities just grow incrementally on their own, which they certainly will do? Or are we going to imagine and intervene and lead the growth and transformation of cities in a more intentional way? And those are all very open questions, and the Global Cities Initiative seeks to bring different faculty together to leverage their different disciplines to come up with interdisciplinary solutions.
Yeah. Well, what do you think are some of the most exciting ideas in urban design right now? Are there projects or initiatives that certain cities or neighborhoods are trying that you find particularly interesting, especially as we think about issues of inequality, gentrification, sustainability?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to start that on a kind of a domestic U.S. note and point to the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, that has been engaged in a longer term, very deep conversation about social equity, social division, and pathways to inclusion and the formation of new equity. And what is very interesting about what's happening in Minneapolis is that they have come to one of the most boring mechanisms that people will, I'm sure, will be familiar with, and that is zoning, land use zoning in cities. Now, for urban planners like me, of course, this is very exciting, but for many others, there's little interest in this. But what Minneapolis is doing is beginning to look at the deep systemic ways in which communities were either protected or excluded from participation in the economy and social life and civic life of the city. And they are going through a very deep systemic overhaul of how they think about the living patterns in Minneapolis. This is extremely exciting and not easy work, but I'd like to elevate that as just as one case that I've got my eye on. We have other cities, certainly like our own in Washington, but also San Francisco and Seattle and New York City, of course, that are in the midst of a really challenging housing crisis, where the cost of housing has elevated so high that people living in the city either have to leave or mortgage their entire lives to even just have a roof over their heads. And so finding new ways of getting stakeholders to participate in housing production is another massive challenge, and there are many exciting new initiatives to kind of take that on. These problems are not easy ones to solve overnight, but the manner in which, for instance, corporate community corporations participate in community development is a very big deal. It's received a lot of press in the Bay Area, but this idea of creating a sustainable economy that everyone can participate in is predicated upon people being able to live in those communities, and so that, of course, is incredibly important and critical. The many issues associated with climate change have been the driver of a lot of innovation recently. And I guess about a year ago now, a little bit more than a year ago, here at Georgetown, we convened all of the local officials from coastal communities between New Orleans and Portland, Maine. And they all came to Georgetown. And we entered into, really frank discussions about what they're actually doing to anticipate and accommodate sea level rise in their communities. Again, these are almost, in some cases, existential challenges for communities that are historic communities in low-lying areas. And in that case, it's another case where the need to innovate is immediate and not easy with a variety of challenges and barriers and obstacles to doing so. And then the last area that's affecting so much of our society, but also impacting local communities in a very dramatic way, is the digital revolution that we're living through. And that also ties back to the new behaviors in this period of the pandemic. And it is really amazing, and everybody seeing this will know that the manner in which we shop, the manner in which we relate to one another, the manner in which we seek to organize ourselves has all been radically reimagined, and is being reimagined virtually every week or every month through the digital technologies that we have available to us. And so those are things that are happening really across the board, but we do see some communities that are kind of adopting behaviors faster than others, and that's a fascinating process to watch.
Let's bring it back home. The Global Cities Initiative recently held a panel discussion that looked back on 20 years of comprehensive planning in the District of Columbia. Could you share with us a little bit more about this gathering, some of the takeaways of that discussion, and what do you hope members of our Georgetown community understand about some of the urban planning questions facing our city?
That's great, thank you. Well, most cities have a document that they call the comprehensive plan. And this is a foundational document for local policy making, for local investment strategies. It's a very important document in so many communities. Typically, these documents have a time horizon of 20 years. And here in Washington, D.C., we have that as well. So we have a comprehensive plan. It is by statute a document that is supposed to guide the city's evolution over the next 20 years. Recently, we were able to do something very special, and that is we find ourselves at a moment in time where the current mayor has proposed a revision to this comprehensive plan document that looks forward 20 years. But we took the opportunity to convene 5 of the previous planning directors from Washington, D.C., going all the way back to 2000, which was a period of time when the city was under the kind of control of what was then known as the Control Board, which was a financial oversight entity, basically overseeing the city during this period of what was essentially, it wasn't legally bankruptcy, but it was essentially bankruptcy. And so this was a moment for us at Georgetown to convene these stakeholders and convene these leaders to look back at the city's evolution over the last 20 years and use that as a point of departure to look forward 20 years. It was the kind of convening that I think only we at Georgetown could have done. It was a really wonderful opportunity to bring very different perspectives together into one dialogue. And some of the issues that, of course, are being discussed are issues of gentrification, issues of social inclusion in Washington. But it was very interesting and remarkable to me that the conversation has evolved so quickly from where it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, there was no investment in the city whatsoever. There were no new housing starts. Nobody was moving to the city. And in fact, the city was at the kind of end of a 50-year-long population decline. And so these last 20 years have represented a turnaround of those long-term trends. And we now are facing, especially with the pandemic, a series of new questions about what we want our city to be in 20 years. And so that was the nature of the convening. We drew an enormous audience from within the university and from across the city. And these are issues that are being actively debated now as this comprehensive plan gets reviewed and adopted by the city council. So it was a unique opportunity to do that. It revealed just how far the city has come in a period of 20 years. And it opened many questions and many kind of alternative scenarios as to what might be possible over the next 20 years. And again, you know, if we think of the changing nature of the technology landscape and how we get around the city, you know, there were no scooters in Washington 20 years ago, and now we've got scooters and shared bikes. And if we think of climate change and increasing heat in the city and how that affects low-income communities, how it affects workers, and importantly, as we think about the strategies that we employ to deliver affordable housing in the city, those are all items that are being thought of in new ways and in new light. And it was really a pleasure and honor for us to host that dialogue.
Thank you. And Uwe, thank you for taking this time to be with us today. In closing, is there a message you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, I always joke with people that we're all experts on cities for those of us who live in cities. This is our lived reality every day. So it's not hard to enter into a passionate discussion about the future of someone's neighborhood or how where people like to congregate in order to find their the best coffee in a neighborhood. But I think, you know, what I would leave everyone with is that these are open questions that may seem matter of fact to us on a day-to-day basis, but these are open questions as to how we truly achieve inclusive, sustainable communities. And our actions have many consequences. And the Global Cities Initiative and just thinking about cities in general is really an opportunity to reflect and think about the kind of outcomes that we want in our communities.
Uwe, I am so grateful to you for being here and for sharing your insights with us. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.